Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and we're going to do a deep dive into talking about vulnerability hangovers as a dismissive avoidant attachment style. So if you're new to my channel, I create daily breakthrough videos for you to learn powerful tools to really upgrade your life and your relationships at the subconscious level, because that is where real change is needed to take place. So let's talk about this. So vulnerability hangovers, this is a term originally coined by Brene Brown. And I'm assuming Brene Brown probably was DA at some point in her life, because she talks a lot about this and wanting to, and a lot of the I am defective core wound. So dismissive avoidant attachment styles, as most of you are probably familiar from this channel already, who are watching, they tend to have a lot of shame at a subconscious level. And it's usually because in a person's upbringing, if there's a lot of neglect, a child at a very young age can't understand consciously, like, oh, my parents are emotionally unavailable, or my parents are not being very good caregivers because there's neglect taking place. Instead, what a child's mind does is interprets that absence of things that they need being brought to them, things like emotional nurturing, care, emotional availability, attunement. They interpret that as like, oh, there must be something wrong with me. I must be defective. And so the more avoidant or the more neglect there really is in childhood, usually the more shame tends to exist. Maybe not in terms of like extreme triggered shame, like somebody feeling really shamed, like from the core wound of I am bad, for example, being triggered, but more like more pervasive shame in a person's upbringing and throughout the course of their life. And it's going to be more likely that somebody who's dismissive avoidant or experiences more emotional neglect also just feels shamed more easily by things, even if somebody isn't actively shaming them. So the idea of vulnerability hangover essentially is that after opening up, after sharing, after being vulnerable, it creates this like almost, feeling of regret the next day or an hour later or 15 minutes later, combined with a lot of triggered shame. And that's the big feeling. And then what often happens in the case of a dismissive avoidant, and I'll do a separate video about this for fearful avoidance, because they also get vulnerability hangovers, but for different reasons and under different sort of pretenses. But what happens essentially, and what's really taking place, is that at a subconscious level, a dismissive avoidant is having a few major painful beliefs activated by the idea of vulnerability. So what's essentially taking place is the dismissive avoidant opens up, they share something inwardly, and they already have these beliefs pre-programmed from earlier childhood experiences the vast majority of the time that basically say, if somebody truly sees me as I am, if they see my fears or if they see my flaws, they'll see that I'm defective. And so all that shame basically gets triggered. It's like, oh, I'm seen, and now my defectiveness is seen. And so that core belief really comes to the forefront. Now, that's not the only stuff that happens. The other core beliefs that really tend to take place for a dismissive avoidant is vulnerability is unsafe, and vulnerability will get me rejected. And so what's taking place is all at once, soon after that vulnerability happens, even though it may be really well received by the person on the other end, even though they might feel connected to the vulnerability, enjoy that you're being vulnerable, feel closer to you, often what happens is the dismissive avoidant at a subconscious level soon after that happens is like, oh no, I'm seen as defective. This is unsafe. Sometimes they feel like they're seen as weak, which also makes them defective. And now there's all this shutting down that starts to happen, because when a dismissive avoidant feels bad, they soothe by shutting down and going inwards the vast majority of the time. So now all these core beliefs are coming up, combined with the behavioral coping mechanisms that are basically triggered off to follow as a result of feeling those emotions of shame, defectiveness, fear, anxiety, worry, disappointment in themselves, regret, those types of emotions. So what do we do about this? Well, the interesting thing is that what often tends to happen next, and this can be really confusing for the partner on the other end, is when there's a lot of vulnerability and a lot of closeness, that can also create this like fear of being too close and losing one's independence and autonomy. And so we'll often see as well that the dismissive avoidant can have this like 3 to 4 day pattern where they either shut down completely, depending on like where you're at in the relationship, or they shut down a lot more and it takes a little bit more time for them to open back up. And it can be really confusing as the partner of the DA, because it's like, wait, what's going on here? Like, I thought we were great. We just had this amazing evening together where we shared our lives and our fears, and now you're cold. And what's actually happening is this individual is going through some of their own fears that are coming up inside of them. So we're going to talk about what to do, but if you want to do a really deep dive into this, as the partner of a DA, go through the advanced attachment style course about dismissive avoidance, and you'll see some of these patterns where they come into play, as well as your own attachment style course if you want more insight into your own patterns and how to not take things personally. Or if you are the DA, start with a 7-day free trial that we have in the link in the description box below, all about reprogramming your attachment styles. Just like the very fundamental, it's all like a lot of this channel's content, but it's got all the reprogramming tools, all of the systems, all the strategies in a workbook, all systemized so that you can save a lot of time and energy. And also it's not so much focused on like the why and the understanding, that's obviously there, but it's a lot more about like really truly how to break through. So you can check that out. But if you experience vulnerability hangovers, some of the most important and effective work for dismissive avoidance is exposure reprogramming work, and really doing that work to slowly expose yourself over time, as well as belief reprogramming, often using a tool called auto suggestion, which we do talk about on this channel, but we do a deep dive into in the school. And these are fantastic tools to start off with in terms of reprogramming some of this, because unfortunately vulnerability is one of the key ingredients needed in order to move beyond the power struggle phase of relationships. And if we don't have a good handle on being vulnerable, if we don't feel safe in it, comfortable in it, we're not going to feel truly seen and understood as individuals. And we're also not going to be allowing ourselves to receive love, support, closeness, connection, and all these different things that are really important in order to build proper love, proper health in our relationships, so that they can last and keep growing and improving and eventually reach that bliss phase in a relationship's life cycle. So hopefully this makes a whole lot of sense. I love this topic. This is a request from one of our students. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.